A man at the absolute peak of his success, the brilliant CEO of a billion-dollar tech firm, makes a choice that will echo through the halls of power and shatter the lives of everyone he knows. He decides to trade everything he built with his wife, their home, their history, their future, for a fleeting fantasy with a supermodel. He hands his pregnant wife divorce papers, believing he holds all the cards. What he doesn't know is that the quiet gentlewoman carrying his child is the daughter of the one man who can destroy him, completely the silent, invisible owner of his entire company. This isn't just a story about a breakup. It's about the catastrophic fallout when ambition collides with a secret that's been hiding in plain sight. The penthouse apartment felt less like a home and more like a showroom for a life well lived. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic, godlike view of downtown Chicago, the city lights twinkling below like a carpet of fallen stars. This was the world William Sterling had built. At 34, he was the boy wonder CEO of Aura Innovations, a tech company whose sleek, intuitive smart home devices had become the gold standard for modern luxury. He was handsome, ruthless in the boardroom, and perpetually featured in magazines that chronicled the lives of the obscenely successful. His wife, Olivia Prescott, was the picture of understated grace. While William was all sharp angles and tailored Italian suits, Olivia was soft curves and warm, intelligent eyes. She was the anchor to his soaring ambition, the quiet force that turned their glass box in the sky into a sanctuary. And now, at 5 months pregnant, she radiated a serene joy that seemed to soften even the apartment's cold, minimalist edges. Tonight she was preparing a late dinner, a simple rosemary chicken that filled the air with a comforting aroma. William was late, as he often was. She hummed softly, one hand resting on the gentle swell of her stomach, a gesture that had become second nature. They'd already picked out a name, if it was a girl, Sophie. The chime of the private elevator announced his arrival. William stepped into the foyer, shrugging off his custom-tailored coat. He looked tired, but there was a strange electric tension in his posture. "You're late," Olivia said, her voice warm and without accusation. "Everything okay at the office?" "The usual fires," he replied, loosening his tie. He walked past her, avoiding her customary kiss, and poured himself a whiskey from the crystal decanter on the bar. 2 fingers neat, his evening ritual. "I saved you dinner," she said, motioning to the oven. "I'm not hungry." His voice was flat. He turned the amber liquid swirling in his glass, and the look on his face made the fine hairs on Olivia's arms stand up. The easy charisma was gone, replaced by a cold, transactional resolve she'd only ever seen him use on business rivals. "William, what is it?" she asked, her heart starting a low, anxious drumbeat. He took a slow sip of his whiskey, his eyes dark and unreadable. He placed the glass down with a decisive click and walked over to the black marble kitchen island. From his briefcase, he pulled out a slim manila folder and slid it across the polished surface. It stopped just inches from her hand. "I think we should talk, Olivia." She looked from his stony face to the folder. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for it. Inside was a thick stack of papers filled with dense legal jargon. But she didn't need to read it. The words at the top of the first page leaped out at her sharp and cruel as broken glass, petition for dissolution of marriage. The scent of rosemary chicken suddenly felt cloying, suffocating. The entire beautiful, perfect world she had so carefully nurtured tilted violently on its axis. What is this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The baby gave a small, insistent kick as if sensing its mother's distress. "It's a divorce settlement," William said, his tone devoid of any emotion. "I've been more than generous. There's a non-disclosure agreement, of course. My lawyers have arranged for everything. It will be clean and quiet." "Clean and quiet." She echoed the words, tasting like poison. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the city lights into a smear of indifferent glitter. "William, I'm pregnant. We're having a baby." "The settlement has a substantial trust fund for the child," he said, as if discussing a line item in a budget report. "You'll both be taken care of for life. You won't have to worry about anything." He said it as if money was the only thing she could possibly be worried about. The betrayal was so immense, so sudden, it was like being plunged into ice water. She stared at him. This man she had loved, this man. She had built a life with the father of her unborn child, and saw a complete stranger. Why? The question was a raw, desperate plea. "Who is she?" For the first time, a flicker of something annoyance, impatience crossed his face. He ran a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair. "It doesn't matter." "It matters to me," she cried, her voice cracking. "I deserve to know why you are throwing us away." He let out a heavy sigh, the sigh of a man burdened by an unpleasant but necessary task. "Her name is Serafina Monet." The name landed like a physical blow. Serafina Monet. The impossibly beautiful supermodel who was the new face of Aura's global marketing campaign. Olivia had seen the billboards all over the city. Serafina draped over their latest smart hub, her eyes promising a world of sleek, effortless perfection. Olivia had even met her once at a company gala. She remembered Serafina's cool, dismissive glance, a look that had assessed and dismissed Olivia in a single predatory heartbeat. "You're leaving your pregnant wife for a billboard." The absurdity, the sheer cliché of it all was staggering. "Don't be dramatic, Olivia." He snapped his voice, turning sharp. "This is what's best. Serafina understands my world, my ambition. We're more aligned." Aligned. He spoke of love and marriage as if they were corporate synergies. The man she married, the one who'd whispered promises to her under the Tuscan sun on their honeymoon, was gone. In his place stood this cold, calculating machine. "I don't want your money, William," she said, her shock hardening into a sliver of defiance. "I want my husband." "That man doesn't exist anymore," he said, picking up his briefcase. "My lawyer, Mr. Davies, will be in touch with yours. I'll be staying at the Peninsula until this is finalized. I've had my things moved." And just like that, he turned and walked to the elevator, the doors sliding shut behind him, with a soft, final hiss. Olivia was left alone in the stunning penthouse, the divorce papers on the counter, the smell of a dinner for two in the air, and the silent, frantic beating of two hearts inside her chest. The gilded cage had become a prison, and its architect had just walked out, leaving her locked inside. The first few days were a blur of disbelief and gut-wrenching sorrow. Olivia moved through the vast, empty apartment, like a ghost, the silence amplifying the frantic monologue of questions in her head. How could I not have seen this? Was it all a lie? What did I do wrong? The home they had built together was now a mausoleum of their shared memories. Every photograph, every piece of furniture, was a testament to a life that had been a sham. Her best friend, a sharp-as-a-tack litigation lawyer named Jessica Barnes, was at her side within an hour of her tearful phone call. Jessica, with her fiery red hair and no-nonsense attitude, took one look at the divorce papers, and her expression hardened. "Generous? This isn't generosity, Liv. This is hush money." Jessica spat, scanning the document. "He's trying to buy your silence with a settlement that's a rounding error for him. And this NDA is ironclad. He wants to erase you." Olivia just shook her head, wrapping her arms around her stomach. "I don't understand. We were happy. We were planning the nursery." "He was planning his exit strategy." Jessica corrected her voice, softening as she put an arm around her friend. "Men like William Sterling don't just fall out of love. They make calculated business decisions. And right now, you and this baby are a liability to his brand." The word liability struck Olivia harder than anything else. She wasn't a wife, a partner, or the mother of his child. She was a problem to be managed. Within a week, the news broke. It wasn't a quiet announcement, but a carefully orchestrated media blitz. Page 6 TMZ and every gossip blog imaginable ran the same story, complete with high-resolution paparazzi photos of William and Serafina Monet leaving a Michelin star restaurant in New York. They were a stunning couple. He the powerful tech mogul, she the ethereal beauty. The narrative was clear. William Sterling had upgraded. The articles barely mentioned Olivia. When they did, she was referred to as his estranged wife, a footnote in the story of his glamorous new chapter. There was no mention of the pregnancy. William's PR team had done their job flawlessly. The humiliation was a physical weight. People she knew, friends of the couple, suddenly stopped returning her calls. Their social circle, she quickly realized, had never been hers. It was William's. She was just a temporary accessory. William's lawyer, a piranha named Gregory Davies, began a campaign of relentless pressure. He called daily, his tone oozing with condescending pity. "Mrs. Sterling," he'd begin. "My client is prepared to be very reasonable, but his patience is not infinite. We would all like to see this resolved amicably, for the sake of the child." The veiled threat was always there. Sign the papers, take the money, and disappear, or things would get ugly. They would drag her name through the mud, paint her as an unstable gold digger trying to trap a wealthy man. Jessica was her rock. "Don't you dare sign anything," she commanded. "We're going to fight this, not for his money, but for your dignity." But fighting felt impossible. Olivia felt fragile, exposed. The stress was taking a toll. Her doctor warned her to stay calm, that extreme anxiety wasn't good for the baby. So with a heavy heart, she made a decision. She couldn't stay in that penthouse, surrounded by ghosts. She packed a few suitcases, left the keys on the counter next to the now wilted flowers William had sent her last week, and walked away from the life she had known. She found a small two-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park, a quiet neighborhood with tree-lined streets that felt a world away from the cold glass tower downtown. It was modest, but it was hers. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of autonomy, however terrifying it was. It was there, surrounded by moving boxes, that she finally allowed herself to confront the biggest question of all her father. Marcus Prescott was a quiet, unassuming man who lived a simple life in rural Wisconsin. He'd been an engineer, or so he'd always told her. He was a widower, a devoted father who had raised Olivia on his own after her mother passed away when she was young. He valued hard work, integrity, and above all, privacy. He had never been impressed by William's wealth or status, only concerned with whether he made his daughter happy. Olivia had called him the day after William left. She'd told him they were separating, editing the story, to spare him the ugliest details. His voice had been full of concern. "Are you okay, Liv? Is the baby okay?" That was his only question. "We're fine, Dad. I'm fine." She'd lied, choking back a sob. "Whatever you need, you just tell me. You know that." She knew. But calling him to ask for help felt like admitting she had failed. William had been her choice, her life. She wanted to prove to herself more than anyone that she could stand on her own 2 feet even now. She had a master's degree in architectural history that she'd never used content to support William's career. Maybe it was time to change that. But as the weeks turned into a month, the reality of her situation sank in. William had frozen their joint accounts. The generous offer was contingent on her signing the NDA. Without it, she had nothing but the small savings account in her own name. She was a pregnant, soon-to-be single mother with a resume that had a 7-year gap on it. The final straw came in the form of a glossy magazine cover in the checkout line at the grocery store. It was Vanity Fair. On the cover, William and Serafina were posed in his penthouse, her penthouse. The headline read, "Power and Passion, Tech Visionary." William Sterling and supermodel Serafina Monet on building a new empire. Inside the article was a nauseating tribute to their cosmic connection and shared vision. William was quoted as saying, "For the first time in my life, I feel like I've met my true equal." He had erased her. In the story of his life, she was being written out, her entire existence redacted. As she stood there, the magazine trembling in her hands, a cold, hard resolve settled deep in her bones. Dignity was one thing, justice was another. He had not just left her. He had tried to annihilate her legacy, her very reality. That evening she sat in her small apartment, the city lights of a different, more humble Chicago outside her window. She picked up her phone. She didn't call her dad's personal number. Instead, she dialed a number she hadn't used in years, the direct line to a man named Mr. Harrington, her father's fiercely loyal and discreet personal attorney. "Mr. Harrington," she said, her voice steady and clear. "It's Olivia Prescott. I need to talk to you about my father's primary business interest, the one in Chicago. I believe it's called Aura Innovations." In the gleaming steel and glass headquarters of Aura Innovations, William Sterling was king. He strode through the open-plan office like a conquering hero, his employees parting before him like the Red Sea. His divorce was old news, his relationship with Serafina a source of public fascination. The company's stock was soaring, buoyed by the endless free publicity. He felt invincible. Serafina was a constant presence at his side. She'd developed a sudden passionate interest in business, offering unsolicited opinions on marketing, branding, and even product design. "Darling, the Aura brand isn't just about technology," she'd purred one evening, tracing the lapel of his suit. "It's about lifestyle, aspiration. We should be sponsoring Art Basel, the Monaco Grand Prix. We need to be seen in the right places with the right people." William, blinded by her beauty and the validation she offered, readily agreed. He began pouring company money into vanity projects, sponsoring Serafina's favorite designer at Paris Fashion Week, a multi-million-dollar Aura Experience yacht party at Cannes, and a new ill-conceived line of Aura by Serafina, designer smart mirrors, that were hemorrhaging money in R&D. This shift did not go unnoticed by David Chen, Aura's meticulous and unassuming chief financial officer. David had been with the company since its early days. He was a numbers man, a pragmatist who believed in fiscal responsibility and sustainable growth. He watched the new expenditures with mounting alarm. He requested a meeting with William, armed with spreadsheets and projections that painted a grim picture. "William, the marketing spend is up 300% this quarter," David said, pointing to a graph showing a steep upward curve. The ROI on these lifestyle events is negligible. We're burning through our cash reserves at an unsustainable rate. The board is going to have questions." William waved a dismissive hand. "The board answers to me, David. You're thinking like an accountant. I'm thinking about brand equity. We're not just selling gadgets anymore. We're selling a dream. This dream is costing us a fortune." David pressed his anxiety palpable. "And this Serafina Mirror project, the preliminary data shows almost no market demand. It's a folly." "It's an innovation," William corrected, his voice laced with irritation. "Serafina has her finger on the pulse of the luxury market. You need to have a little more vision." But David's concerns weren't just about spending. He was the one who had to communicate with their majority shareholder, a notoriously private investment firm known only as MP Holdings. For years, MP Holdings had been a silent partner. They owned 60% of the company, a controlling interest, but had never once interfered with William's management. Their instructions, delivered through a small, prestigious law firm in Milwaukee, had always been the same: run the company as if it were your own. We trust your judgment. Lately, however, the inquiries from the law firm representing MP Holdings had become more frequent and pointed. They were requesting detailed breakdowns of expenditures, minutes from executive meetings, and projections for the next 2 fiscal years. The tone was no longer passive, it was forensic. "I'm getting daily emails from Harrington's office," David told William, looking troubled. "They're asking about the new marketing budget. They want a full P&L on the Serafina Mirror project. They've never been this involved." William scoffed. "They're probably just some faceless fund managers getting nervous. Send them the reports. They'll be dazzled by the press we're getting." He truly believed it. In his mind, the company was his creation, his genius made manifest. MP Holdings was just old money, lucky to have gotten in on the ground floor. William Sterling was the engine. He was Aura Innovations. Meanwhile, in a quiet law office in Milwaukee, Mr. Harrington was compiling a dossier. It was thick, detailed, and damning. It contained David Chen's concerned emails, every extravagant expense report, every negative market analysis of William's pet projects. And it also contained a signed affidavit from Olivia Prescott, detailing the emotional distress and coercion she had been subjected to, along with a medical report from her obstetrician on the physical effects of that stress. Mr. Harrington was a calm, grandfatherly man with kind eyes that missed nothing. He'd known Olivia since she was a little girl. He had worked for her father for over 40 years, and his loyalty was absolute. "He's arrogant, Marcus," Harrington said over a secure phone line to his employer. "He's treating the company like his personal piggy bank. The CFO is practically screaming for help, but Sterling won't listen." On the other end of the line, Marcus Prescott's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of immense power. "And Olivia, she's strong, stronger than he ever gave her credit for. She's focusing on the baby, but she's ready. She understands what needs to be done." There was a long pause. Marcus was not a man given to rash decisions. He had watched William Sterling for years, believing he had found a brilliant, ambitious young man to steward the company he had painstakingly built from a small workshop in his garage into a global powerhouse. He had given William autonomy, wanting to see what he would build free from interference. He'd seen William's ambition as an asset. Now he saw it as a cancer. "The man I entrusted with my company is threatening the well-being of my daughter and my grandchild," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a dangerously low temperature. "He has mistaken my silence for absence. It's time to remind him who owns the board." Harrington knew what this meant. "I'll make the arrangements," he said. "I will call an emergency meeting of the board of directors for next Monday." "Good," Marcus replied. "And Harrington, make sure Mr. Sterling's personal lawyer is present. I want him to have counsel when his world comes to an end." The storm had gathered. The pressure was dropping. And in his glass tower in Chicago, William Sterling, utterly oblivious, was busy approving the designs for a diamond-encrusted smart mirror. Convinced the thunder he was hearing was the sound of applause. The summons for the emergency board meeting arrived on a Friday afternoon via a curt, formal email from Mr. Harrington's office. The stated purpose was vague: to discuss urgent matters of corporate governance and fiscal strategy at the behest of the majority shareholder. William read the email with a flash of annoyance, not alarm. He saw it as a bureaucratic hassle, a box-ticking exercise demanded by some nervous investors. He forwarded it to David Chen with a one-line directive: "Get all the recent positive press clippings and sales forecasts ready. We'll put their minds at ease." He spent the weekend with Serafina in the Hamptons, chartering a yacht and attending an exclusive white party. He was the center of attention, the titan of tech with a supermodel on his arm. The meeting on Monday was a distant nuisance, a small cloud in his otherwise perfect blue sky. On Monday morning, he arrived at the Aura headquarters, feeling untouchable. He wore a charcoal grey suit that probably cost more than his assistant's car, his confidence radiating from him like a physical force. He'd asked his lawyer, Gregory Davies, to join him more as a power play than a necessity, a signal to the board that he was not to be trifled with. "Just a formality, Greg," William said, as they rode the elevator up to the 50th floor boardroom. "We'll show them a few hockey stick growth charts, flash a few magazine covers, and we'll be out of there in an hour." Davies nodded, his expression smug. "They'd be fools to challenge you. You are the company." They entered the boardroom. It was a cathedral of corporate power with a long mahogany table and a wall of glass overlooking the city. The other 4 board members were already seated. They were older, seasoned executives who had always been deferential to William. Today, however, they looked tense. They offered tight, unsmiling nods as William took his seat at the head of the table. David Chen sat further down, looking pale and avoiding William's gaze. There was one empty chair. The seat directly to the right of William's, reserved for the representative of the majority shareholder. It had remained empty for every board meeting William had ever chaired. "All right, let's get this started." William began, his tone brisk and impatient. "I understand MP Holdings has some concerns. David has prepared a presentation that should address any—" He was cut off by the sound of the boardroom door opening. A man stepped in, followed by Mr. Harrington. The man was in his late 60s with a quiet demeanor and silvering hair. He wore a simple, well-made, but unremarkable grey suit. He looked more like a retired college professor than a corporate raider. William didn't recognize him. "I apologize for my tardiness," the man said, his voice calm and measured. He walked over to the empty chair and sat down. Mr. Harrington took a seat behind him. William stared at him, irritated by the interruption. "And you are?" he asked, his tone dripping with condescension. The man looked directly at William, his gaze level and piercing. The kindness in his eyes that Olivia knew so well was gone, replaced by something ancient and unyielding like granite. "My name is Marcus Prescott," he said simply. "I own MP Holdings." The name hit the room like a sonic boom. William's condescending smile froze on his face. Prescott. It couldn't be. He looked at the man's face. Really looked at it for the first time, and saw the faint, unmistakable echo of Olivia in the line of his jaw, the shape of his eyes. A cold dread, slick and oily, began to crawl up his spine. David Chen looked like he was going to be physically ill. The other board members shifted uncomfortably, their faces a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. Gregory Davies, the shark-like lawyer, was speechless, his mouth slightly agape. "Olivia's father," William stammered the words, feeling like ash in his mouth. "That is my secondary role here today," Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave. "My primary role is that of the man who owns 60% of this company, the man who personally approved the seed funding that took you from a garage tinkerer to a CEO, the man whose trust you have used, abused, and betrayed." Marcus gestured to Mr. Hong. Harrington, who began distributing thick, spiral-bound folders to everyone at the table, including a stunned William and his lawyer. "Inside that folder," Marcus continued, his voice as cold and sharp as ice, "you will find a detailed accounting of your tenure as CEO for the past 6 months. You will find the exorbitant expenditures on what can only be described as vanity projects. You will find the internal projections from your own CFO, Mr. Chen, projections you willfully ignored, warning of the catastrophic cash burn. You will find market research demonstrating that the Serafina mirror is a product with no viable consumer base, a multi-million-dollar folly designed to stroke your own ego and that of your mistress." Every word was a hammer blow. William fumbled through the pages, seeing his own extravagant decisions laid bare in the unforgiving language of finance. He saw David Chen's ignored warnings, the damning charts, the abysmal focus group reports. This is just aggressive growth strategy." William sputtered, his usual glib confidence deserting him. "Brand building. Do not insult my intelligence," Marcus snapped, his voice cracking like a whip. "You have treated this company's assets as your personal slush fund. You have jeopardized the financial health of this enterprise and the livelihoods of its 1,200 employees. That is a breach of your fiduciary duty. That is grounds for dismissal." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the suffocatingly silent room. "But that is only the business side of things. Then there is the personal." Marcus's gaze bored into William, and for the first time in his life, William Sterling felt true abject fear. "You married my daughter. You stood before me and promised to love and protect her, and you discarded her in the middle of her pregnancy with the callousness one might show to an outdated piece of software. You subjected her to emotional cruelty and public humiliation, believing that your money and your power made you untouchable." He leaned forward slightly. "You were wrong. Your power was never your own. It was a loan, and I am here today to call it in." Marcus looked away from William, addressing the rest of the board. "I am calling for a vote of no confidence in CEO William Sterling, effective immediately. All those in favor?" One by one, the hands of the other 4 board members went up without hesitation. David Chen slowly, solemnly raised his as well. It was a unanimous decision. William stared dumbfounded. His world, his kingdom, the entire universe that revolved around him had just been snuffed out in less than 10 minutes. "You can't do this," he whispered, a desperate, pathetic plea. Marcus Prescott stood up, his authority absolute. "I already have. Mr. Harrington will provide you with the details of your termination. Your security access has been revoked. A security detail will escort you to your office to collect your personal belongings, and then they will escort you from the premises." He looked down at William, a fallen king, at the head of a table that was no longer his. "You told my daughter that the man she married no longer exists," Marcus said, his voice low and final. As of this moment, the CEO of Aura Innovations no longer exists either. The fallout was immediate and brutal. As William sat frozen in his chair, his mind struggling to process the cataclysm that had just occurred, his phone buzzed on the table. It was a news alert from the Wall Street Journal. William Sterling, abruptly ousted as CEO of Aura Innovations, founder's silent partner, Marcus Prescott, takes control. The story had been pre-written, ready to be published the second the vote was cast. Marcus had orchestrated a perfect corporate execution. 2 grim-faced security guards, men who had previously nodded to him with deference, entered the boardroom. "Mr. Sterling, if you'll come with us." The walk to his office was a walk of shame. The open-plan workspace, once a sea of admiring faces, was now filled with employees who stared at their screens, pretending not to notice the public execution of their former leader. The whispers followed him like a trail of smoke. In his glass-walled corner office, one of the guards handed him a cardboard box. "Personal effects only, sir." He numbly packed his desk, a framed photo of him and Olivia from their wedding, a photo he'd forgotten was even there, a stupid paperweight from a tech conference, his favorite pen. Every object was a relic from a life that had just been vaporized. As he was escorted towards the elevators, he saw David Chen. The CFO wouldn't meet his eye. "David," William said, his voice raspy. "You—" "I warned you, William," David said quietly, his face full of regret. "I told you this was coming. You wouldn't listen." The final humiliation was having his security badge deactivated before his very eyes. The guard swiped it. The light flashed red, and a part of his identity was stripped away. He was led out of the building, not through the grand main entrance, but through a sterile service exit into a back alley. The cold Chicago wind hit him a stark contrast to the climate-controlled air of his former empire. He stood there for a moment, clutching his small box of belongings, a captain unceremoniously thrown off his own ship. His first instinct was to call Serafina. He needed her. He needed her to tell him this was all a mistake, that his power wasn't gone. He fumbled for his phone and dialed her number. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright and breathless. "William, darling, I was just about to call you. You will not believe who I'm having lunch with. It's the casting director for the new James Bond film, Sarah," he said, his voice cracking. "Something's happened." "Oh." The brightness in her voice dimmed slightly. "Is it about the mirror launch? Did you get the diamond prototype approved?" "No, I've been fired." The words felt foreign, impossible. There was a dead silence on the other end of the line. For a full 10 seconds, the only sound was the distant city traffic. "Fired," she finally said, her voice completely changed. It was flat cold, stripped of all its practiced warmth. "What do you mean, fired?" "Olivia's father. He owns the company. He owns everything. He just fired me." Another pause. He could hear the clinking of cutlery in the background, the murmur of a restaurant. He could almost picture her weighing her options, calculating her next move with the same ruthless efficiency he had once admired. "Listen, William," she said, her voice now distant and clipped. "I'm in the middle of something very important right now. My agent is calling. I have to go." "Sarah, wait." The line went dead. He stood there, phone in hand, staring at the brick wall of the alley. She hadn't even said she was sorry. There was no sympathy, no support. The cosmic connection had been severed the moment his net worth plummeted. He had been a stepping stone, and she had just stepped off him onto the next one. He called his lawyer, Gregory Davies. "What the hell do we do, Greg? Can they do this?" Davies' voice was strained, the usual arrogant bluster gone. His ownership is legitimate, William. I've had my team looking into MP Holdings for the past hour. It's an ironclad private trust. He's the sole beneficiary. There's nothing we can do. He has absolute control. The lawyer cleared his throat. William, regarding my retainer, given the change in your financial circumstances, we'll need to discuss a new payment structure going forward. Even his legal shark was jumping ship. Desperate and utterly alone, William took a cab to the Peninsula Hotel, the luxurious suite he now called home. As he walked through the opulent lobby, the concierge gave him a look of strained pity. Mr. Sterling, a message for you, he said, handing him a crisp hotel envelope. Inside was a letter from the hotel management, politely informing him that the corporate account used to pay for his suite had been suspended effective immediately. They would require a personal credit card to cover any further nights. His corporate cards, he soon discovered, had all been cancelled. He tried his personal American Express black card. Declined. A sick realization dawned on him. His entire liquid worth was tied up in company stock and bonuses assets that Marcus Prescott could and likely would freeze or claw back due to his breach of fiduciary duty. The unraveling was swift and total. Within a few hours he had gone from a titan of industry to a man with a box of office supplies, a cancelled credit card and a dead phone line, to a lover who had already forgotten his name. He was a ghost haunting the lobbies of a life he no longer owned. He had traded his wife, his child, and his integrity for a world of glittering surfaces, and he had just discovered that underneath there was nothing at all. While William's world imploded, Olivia's was quietly, carefully being rebuilt. The day after the board meeting, her father called her. There was no triumphant, "I told you so," in his voice, only gentle concern. "It's done, Liv," he said simply. "He's gone." Olivia felt a complex wave of emotions, relief, certainly, but also a strange, hollow sadness for the man he used to be, for the love she thought they had. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered. "You don't need to thank me for protecting my family," he said. "Now the real work begins. The company is in disarray. It needs stable leadership to reassure the employees and the market." "Are you going to run it?" she asked. "No," he said firmly. "I'm an engineer, not a CEO. I build things, I don't run them. Besides, this company's future isn't my legacy to define anymore. It's yours." Olivia was stunned. "Mine, Dad. I don't know the first thing about running a tech company." "You have a master's in architectural history," he reminded her. "You understand structure design and how people live and interact with the spaces around them. That's exactly what Aura Innovations does. It designs the architecture of the modern home. You have the vision William lost sight of. He got obsessed with celebrity and luxury. You understand the home part of smart home." He continued, his voice full of a pride she had not heard in a long time. "I'm appointing an interim CEO, a trusted colleague, to handle the day-to-day. But I'm creating a new position. I want you to be the chairwoman of the board of directors. You won't run the company, you will guide it. You will set its moral compass and its long-term vision. It's your birthright, Olivia, and it will be your child's legacy." It was a staggering proposition. For years she had willingly taken a back seat, believing her role was to support William's dream. The idea of having her own, of wielding that kind of influence, was both terrifying and exhilarating. But as she placed a hand on her now prominently rounded belly, she felt a surge of purpose. She wasn't just Olivia Prescott anymore. She was Sophie's mother. She had to build a world she wanted her daughter to grow up in. "Okay, Dad. she said, her voice filled with a newfound strength. "I'll do it." Her first act as chairwoman was to call an all-hands meeting at the company. Standing before the 1,200 employees, her pregnancy a quiet symbol of the future, she was a stark contrast to William's slick corporate persona. She spoke not of synergy or disruption, but of values. Aura Innovations was founded on a simple idea to make people's lives better and more connected. She said, her voice clear and steady. Somewhere along the way, we started chasing glamour instead of purpose. We started selling a lifestyle instead of solving problems. That ends today. Our focus is returning to our core mission, creating beautiful, intuitive technology that strengthens the family and the home. She announced her first major decision. The Aura by Serafina Mirror project was officially cancelled. The R&D budget would be reallocated to 2 new initiatives. First, a new division focused on accessibility tech, designing products for the elderly and people with disabilities. Second, a charitable foundation funded by 10% of the company's annual profits, dedicated to providing safe housing for families in need. A wave of applause, genuine and heartfelt, swept through the auditorium. The employees who had been nervous and uncertain about the company's future saw in Olivia not just a new leader, but a return to the company's soul. She received a standing ovation. David Chen watched from the wings, a look of profound respect on his face. He had a leader he could believe in again. Over the next few months, Olivia blossomed in her new role. She was a natural. She listened more than she talked. She valued her team's expertise, and she led with a quiet empathy that inspired fierce loyalty. She moved the company out of the ostentatious downtown skyscraper and into a modern, collaborative campus in a revitalized industrial district, a space designed for innovation, not just for showcasing a view. 2 months later, Olivia gave birth to a healthy, beautiful baby girl. She named her Sophie. As she held her daughter in her arms, she looked around the warm, sunlit room in her Lincoln Park home, a home she had bought with her own salary, and felt a sense of peace she hadn't known was possible. She was not a wife who had been discarded. She was a mother, a leader, and the architect of her own life. She was building a different kind of empire, one founded not on ego and greed, but on integrity and purpose. A year and a half later, the new campus of Aura Innovations was bathed in the crisp light of a perfect Chicago autumn. The sprawling industrial chic complex, converted from a series of old brick warehouses, was a testament to Olivia's vision. Gone was the cold, imposing skyscraper that served as a monument to a single man's ego. This place was designed for people. Green roofs, collaborative open-air courtyards, and a subsidized daycare hummed with a quiet, productive energy. William had built a vertical kingdom to be admired from afar. Olivia had cultivated a horizontal community to be lived in. She was walking through the main R&D lab, a space that buzzed with creativity. A recent feature in Wired magazine had dubbed her the conscience of Silicon Prairie, a title that made her blush, but also filled her with a sense of deep pride. She wasn't a coder or an engineer, but she had an intuitive grasp of human-centered design. She stopped at a workstation where a young engineer, Maria, was testing their newest flagship product. "How is the Guardian prototype coming along?" Olivia asked, her voice warm. The Guardian was her passion project, an elegant, non-intrusive home monitoring system designed for seniors living alone. It used ambient sensors and machine learning to detect anomalies in daily routines, a prolonged period of inactivity, and could alert family members or emergency services. It was the antithesis of the diamond-encrusted smart mirror. The fall detection algorithm is at 99.8% accuracy." Maria said, her face alight with excitement. "And we got a letter yesterday from one of our beta testers, an 82-year-old man in Ohio. His daughter lives 3 states away. He said for the first time in 5 years, she stopped calling him 3 times a day, just to make sure he's okay. He said he feels like he has his independence back, and she has her peace of mind." Olivia's eyes welled up slightly. This was the ROI she cared about. This was the metric of success that mattered. That's wonderful, Maria. Keep up the incredible work." This professional fulfillment was mirrored by a personal joy that was deeper and more profound than anything she had ever known. Her life now revolved around a different, much smaller son, her daughter Sophie. That Saturday, her Lincoln Park brownstone was filled with the sweet smell of banana pancakes and the sound of tiny feet pattering on hardwood floors. Sophie, now a curious and determined toddler, with her mother's smile and her grandfather's calm, observant eyes, was the undisputed ruler of the household. Marcus was visiting for the weekend, as he did most weekends. He was on the floor, his suit and tie persona completely gone, replaced by a soft sweater and an expression of pure adoration as he helped Sophie stack a wobbly tower of wooden blocks. "Higher! Grandpa, higher!" Sophie squealed with delight as the tower finally tumbled the blocks, scattering across the colorful rug. Olivia knelt down, placing a plate with a small, syrupy pancake on the coffee table. "Breakfast is served, my little architect." Marcus watched her, a gentle smile on his face. "You know," he said quietly, "when I started the company in my garage all those years ago, I dreamt it would one day build amazing things. But I never imagined the best thing it would ever build is this." He gestured around the room at Olivia, at Sophie, at the warm, happy chaos of their life. "You took the pieces he broke, and you built a real home, Liv, for you and for her. I'm so proud of the mother you are." His words touched her deeply. Her success as chairwoman was gratifying, but her success here, in these quiet moments of love and normalcy, was her true masterpiece. She thought of the life she'd had with William, a life of galas of performance, of maintaining a perfect image in their glass box in the sky. It was a life built to be photographed. This life was built to be lived. Later that week, she was downtown to meet Jessica for lunch. The weather had turned, and the city was bracing for winter. A cold, persistent drizzle fell from a gunmetal gray sky, and the wind whipped off Lake Michigan, forcing pedestrians to hunch deep into their coats. Olivia stood at a busy intersection on Michigan Avenue, waiting for the light to change when a man across the street caught her eye. He was huddled at a bus stop, trying to shield his face from the wind. He was thin, almost gaunt, and his worn, ill-fitting coat looked insufficient for the biting cold. The sharp, custom-tailored suits were gone. The confident swagger replaced by a defeated slump in his shoulders. It took her a full 10 seconds to realize it was William. The change was so shocking it was disorienting. He was no longer a titan, no longer a king. He was just a man stripped of all his power and prestige, waiting for a bus in the rain. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up, and for a heart-stopping moment, their eyes locked across the torrent of yellow cabs and city buses. She saw a flicker of everything in his eyes, shock, disbelief, and then a wave of shame so profound it was like a physical blow. He flinched, his face contorting in an expression of raw, agonizing regret. He looked at her healthy, confident, wrapped in a warm coat, the picture of a life well lived, and it was as if he was seeing the ghost of the entire world he had burned to the ground. He broke eye contact first, turning away abruptly and fumbling in his pocket, pretending to look for something. When the bus hissed to a stop, he shuffled on without a backward glance, swallowed by the crowd of anonymous commuters, erased by the mundane rhythm of the city. Olivia stood rooted to the spot, the rain cold on her face. The hatred, the anger she had once felt, was gone. In its place was a vast, empty pity. He had nothing. The divorce had been brutal on him. His blatant mismanagement had allowed the board to enact clawback clauses on his bonuses and stock options. He'd been left with a fraction of his former worth. Serafina had never spoken to him again. His friends had vanished. He was an island, completely and utterly alone. "Liv, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Jessica had come up behind her, putting a hand on her arm. Olivia took a slow breath, the cold air filling her lungs. "Something like that," she murmured. Seeing him wasn't a shock of pain, but a quiet moment of finality. He was a postscript to a chapter she had finished reading long ago. He had chased a supernova, a blindingly brilliant existence that was always destined to collapse into a black hole. She had chosen to cultivate a garden, tending to it with patience and purpose, and now it was flourishing beyond her wildest dreams. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a picture message from Sophie's daycare. It was a blurry photo of her daughter, face lit up with a triumphant grin, having just taken her first few wobbly, independent steps. A real, unburdened smile spread across Olivia's face. She looked across the street one last time at the spot where William had stood. There was nothing there now but rain and strangers. He was an echo. Sophie was the future. The crosswalk sign flashed white. Olivia turned to her friend, linked her arm through hers, and walked into the light. And so Olivia Prescott's story comes to a close. But her legacy is just beginning. This wasn't a simple tale of revenge. It was a story about resilience, integrity, and the quiet, unshakable power that lies within those who are underestimated. William Sterling built an emir of glass and ego, and it shattered just as easily. Olivia built an empire of purpose and compassion, and it's one that will stand the test of time, a true legacy for her daughter. She proved that the best response to betrayal isn't to destroy what your enemy has, but to build something better for yourself. What did you think of this incredible story of justice and empowerment? What would you have done in Olivia's shoes? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one. If this story moved you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who needs to hear that it's possible to build a beautiful new beginning from the wreckage of the past. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next real-life drama. Thank you for listening. In the glittering world of Manhattan's elite, Marcus Thorne was a king, and his annual company gala was his coronation. This year, he stood with his mistress Isabella on his arm, ready to claim the ultimate prize. His wife Amelia was supposed to be at home, a forgotten, simple woman he'd deemed unworthy of his new life. But he made one fatal mistake. He underestimated the woman he betrayed. While the mistress took the stage to claim their shared victory, the ballroom doors swung open, revealing a wife no one recognized, and a truth that would bring an empire to its knees. The silence in their Upper East Side penthouse was a specific kind of quiet. It wasn't peaceful. It was hollow, the sound of space that had once been filled with laughter and conversation. Emilia Thorne stood at the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the river of headlights on Fifth Avenue, but her gaze was unfocused. The city lights, once a shared dream, now felt like a million glittering eyes watching her loneliness. Her husband, Marcus Thorne, was a man forged in the crucible of ambition. When she'd met him, he was a brilliant junior analyst with a charmingly crooked smile and dreams that seemed to light up the world around him. Emilia, with her quiet intelligence and unwavering belief in him, had been his anchor. She'd proofread his reports, talked him through nerve-wracking presentations, and celebrated every small victory as if it were her own. She had put her own promising career in corporate law on hold to be the foundation upon which he built his empire. Now he was Marcus Thorne, Executive Vice President of Thorne Industries, the sprawling conglomerate his father, Alistair Thorne, had built from the ground up. The crooked smile had been straightened by expensive orthodontics, and his dreams were no longer shared over takeout on their tiny apartment floor. They were announced in boardrooms and whispered about in the pages of the Wall Street Journal, and in the process the man she loved had become a stranger, replaced by a polished, impeccably tailored effigy who moved through their shared life with the detached efficiency of a CEO managing an underperforming asset. The Thorne Industries annual gala was less than a week away. It was the social and corporate event of the season, a night where fortunes were made and careers were cemented under the grand chandeliers of the Plaza Hotel. For years, Emilia had attended on Marcus's arm, a quiet but proud partner. But this year was different. "You're not seriously thinking of going, are you?" Marcus had asked 2 nights ago, not even looking up from his tablet. He was scrolling through market projections, his brow furrowed in concentration. The question was casual, but the dismissal in his tone was a physical blow. Emilia had been arranging flowers in a vase, a small act of defiance against the sterile modernity of their home. Her hands stilled. "Of course I am. It's the gala, Marcus. I've already been in touch with a stylist." He finally looked up, and his eyes, once warm and full of adoration, were coolly analytical. He scanned her simple linen dress and bare face as if she were a line item he was about to cut from a budget. "Emilia, listen. This year is critical. Dad is about to announce the new global VP position. It's between me and Isabella Ricci. The entire board will be their international investors. It's not a social call. It's the final round of the longest job interview of my life. And I've been by your side for every other round," she replied, her voice softer than she intended. "Why would this be any different?" "Because," he said, sighing with a theatrical impatience that was becoming his default mode, "you don't fit. Not anymore. The wives of the other executives, they play the game. They run charities, they sit on boards, they know how to network. You're wonderful, honey, but your world is here." He gestured vaguely around the silent, opulent apartment. "You wouldn't be comfortable. And frankly, your presence would be a distraction I can't afford." A distraction. That's what she had become. The anchor was now a dead weight. Each word was a carefully chosen dart designed to wound her confidence until she retreated willingly. He was telling her she was not enough, but wrapping it in the language of concern. The name Isabella Ricci hung in the air between them. Isabella was the company's brilliant, beautiful, and utterly ruthless chief of mergers and acquisitions. She was everything Emilia was not, sharp-edged, dressed in Tom Ford, and armed with a smile that could close a billion-dollar deal or cut a rival to shreds. Emilia had seen the way Marcus looked at Isabella in company photos. A spark of shared, ravenous ambition she hadn't seen in his eyes for years. not since he had looked at her that way. "I see," Amelia said, turning back to her flowers, her posture rigid. "So you'll be going alone. It's better this way." For us, he'd said the lie smooth and practiced. He'd already stood up and walked to the bar to pour himself a scotch, the conversation for him already over. Now standing by the window, his words echoed in the empty space. It wasn't just about the gala. It was about the late nights that were no longer explained the scent of a perfume, something expensive and floral like Chanel No. 5 that clung to his suit jackets, and the second phone he thought she didn't know about. It was about the emotional chasm that had opened between them, a vast, silent canyon she could no longer pretend wasn't there. Her phone buzzed on the marble countertop. It was a message from her best friend, Julian Croft, a fiercely talented but still struggling fashion designer. "Did you decide on a concept for the gala dress yet? I have a sketch for that emerald silk we talked about that will make every jaw in the room hit the floor. Call me." Amelia's fingers trembled as she typed a reply. "Change of plans, I'm not going this year." Julian's reply was instantaneous. "What, call me? Now." She ignored the call. She couldn't bring herself to voice the humiliation to say the words out loud. "My husband is ashamed of me. He thinks I'm a liability. Admitting it would make it irrevocably real." Later that evening, Marcus came home humming a tune she didn't recognize. He seemed lighter, energized. He dropped his briefcase by the door and loosened his tie. "Big day," he announced to the room at large. "Isabella and I finally broke through on the Petrocorp merger. It's the deal of the decade. If we land this, the VP position is all but guaranteed." He didn't specify who the "we" referred to. "That's wonderful, Marcus." Amelia said, her voice a perfect imitation of the supportive wife she was supposed to be. He walked over and kissed her on the forehead, a gesture so devoid of passion it felt like a corporate formality. "See, this is what I'm talking about. The pressure is immense. The gala is the final presentation stage. Alistair wants Isabella and me to say a few words about the merger. It's our victory lap. There it was again. The new us." He disappeared into their bedroom to change, leaving his briefcase on the floor. For a moment, Amelia just stared at it. It was a sleek leather vessel of his new life, a life from which she was being systematically excluded. A dark, unfamiliar impulse rose within her. For 10 years she had respected his privacy, his space, his work. She was his trusted partner, but she wasn't that anymore. She was an outsider. With her heart hammering against her ribs, she knelt and clicked open the latches. The interior was organized with his signature precision folders, a laptop, a tablet. But nestled in a side pocket, tucked into a velvet pouch, was a small square box. It was a shade of deep red, so iconic it was instantly recognizable. Cartier. Her breath hitched. Was it for her a peace offering? An apology for his cruelty about the gala? Hope, fragile and foolish, fluttered in her chest. She lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, was a necklace. It wasn't a delicate chain or a simple pendant. It was a statement piece, a river of brilliant cut diamonds, cascading from a central, impossibly large sapphire that glittered under the dim light like a shard of the midnight sky. It was breathtakingly beautiful. And it was not her. Amelia's style was classic, understated. This was a warrior's jewel, a trophy to be worn by someone who commanded attention, who walked into a room and owned it. It was a necklace for a woman like Isabella Ricci. The hope in her chest died, replaced by an icy certainty that froze her from the Samoturuta. This was Isabella's reward for the Petrocorp deal. This was the jewel that would adorn the neck of the woman who stood by her husband's side at the gala, the woman who had taken her place. She gently closed the box, placed it back in the velvet pouch, and secured it in the briefcase, her movements steady and precise. She clicked the latches shut. When she stood up, the reflection that looked back at her from the dark window was not of a heartbroken wife. The tears she expected were not there. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, but within them a new light was beginning to dawn. It was the cold, hard glint of resolve. Marcus had called her a distraction. He had deemed her unworthy. He had tried to lock her away in their gilded cage. But he had forgotten one crucial detail. It was Emilia who had taught him how to read a balance sheet. It was Emilia who had stayed up with him for nights on end, helping him research the arcane legal precedents that won him his first major case for the company. He had discarded her, but he had forgotten to take back the knowledge and the strength she had given him. The gala was in 5 days. He thought he had barred the door. He had no idea she was about to build her own. The days leading up to the gala became a masterclass in deception, a silent, brutal war waged within the pristine walls of their apartment. Emilia became an actress, and her performance was flawless. She played the part of the chastened, compliant wife. She agreed that Marcus was right, that the gala was too much pressure, and that she would be much happier at home with a book. She made his favorite meals, asked about his day with a convincing smile, and wished him luck on the final push for the Petrocorp merger. Her compliance seemed to relieve him. He became more relaxed around her, almost magnanimous in his victory. He no longer saw her as a problem to be managed, but as a settled issue, a box that had been ticked. This carelessness was his second mistake. It allowed her the space she needed to uncover the full architecture of his betrayal. The gaslighting had been happening for months, a slow, insidious erosion of her reality. Every suspicion she'd voiced had been turned back on her. Another late night, Marcus Emilia, the deal is at a critical stage. You know that. Why are you trying to make me feel guilty for working hard for us? Who is Isabella, who keeps texting you after 10 p.m.? She's my colleague. We're leading the biggest project of our careers. Do you want me to fail? Your insecurity is becoming a real problem. This shirt smells like perfume. I was in meetings all day. People wear perfume. My God, you're becoming paranoid. Maybe you should talk to someone. He had made her believe that the problem was her, not his behavior. He had painted her as jealous, unstable, and irrational until she had started to question her own sanity. But the sight of that Cartier necklace had been like a lightning strike, illuminating the entire twisted landscape of his lies. Now she saw his tactics for what they were, not a defense, but a deliberate, cruel strategy. Her investigation began with the shared family tablet she hadn't touched in months. He used it for personal browsing, assuming she never looked at it. His search history was a digital diary of his affair. Reservations for 2 at Daniel, a restaurant he'd always claimed was impossible to get into. Hotel bookings at the Carlyle for nights he was supposedly on a red-eye to Chicago. Receipts from luxury boutiques on Madison Avenue for gifts she had never received. And then there were the photos. Tucked away in a hidden folder in his cloud storage was a collection of pictures of him and Isabella. They were in Paris, a trip he'd claimed was a solo corporate retreat, smiling under the Eiffel Tower. They were on a yacht, the sun glinting off the water, Isabella in a bikini draped over him. In every photo he wore the same expression, the unguarded, joyful smile she hadn't seen directed at her in years. He looked like the man she had fallen in love with, and seeing that man with another woman was a fresh, searing pain that eclipsed everything else. She scrolled through the images, her breath catching in her throat, a wave of nausea washing over her. This wasn't a recent fling. This was a life. A whole parallel life he had been living behind her back. For how long? A year. 2. She thought back, recontextualizing every late night, every business trip, every moment of manufactured anger. The scale of the deception was staggering. The final piece clicked into place when she found the emails. Using a password she had helped him create years ago, the name of their first dog, she accessed his personal account. There, in a neatly organized folder labeled Project Nightingale, was his correspondence with Isabella. It wasn't just romantic, it was a business plan. They weren't just lovers, they were conspirators. They discussed the Petrocorp merger in detail, but they also discussed Alistair Thorne's impending retirement and their strategy for ousting other senior executives. Their plan was to secure the global VP position for Marcus, with Isabella as his second-in-command, effectively giving them total control over the company's future. But one email sent by Isabella to Marcus just 3 weeks ago made Amelia's blood run cold. Subject: The E problem. Marcus: We need to discuss the Amelia situation. Your father is a traditionalist. He values family and loyalty above all. A messy divorce on the eve of the announcement could be catastrophic. It would make you look unstable. He might pass you over. You need to keep her managed and out of sight until after the gala. Once you're named VP, your position will be unassailable. We can handle the fallout then. Give her whatever she wants to go away quietly. But until that promotion is signed, she is your biggest liability. A liability. The same word he had used. It hadn't even been his own. It had been Isabella's. He was a puppet, and Isabella was pulling the strings. The humiliation, the patronizing dismissal. It was all part of a calculated strategy to manage her. Amelia closed the laptop, a terrifying calm settling over her. The grief was still there, a hot, aching core in the center of her chest, but it was now encased in something harder, colder. Rage. Not a hot, screaming rage, but a glacial, focused fury. They thought she was a problem to be managed, a simple domestic creature who could be placated and then discarded. They had analyzed her as a business risk, a variable to be controlled. They had fundamentally misunderstood who she was. She stood up and walked to her closet. Pushing past the rows of tasteful beige and navy blue outfits that Marcus approved of, she reached into the very back. There in a garment bag was the person she used to be. She pulled out a tailored pantsuit, the fabric still crisp. It was from her time at the law firm, a life she had packed away. She had been good at her job. Sharp, analytical, and relentless. Marcus had loved that about her, before he decided he needed a wife who was a soft cushion rather than a whetstone. He had told her she wouldn't fit in at the gala. He was right. The old Amelia wouldn't. The quiet, supportive wife would have been swallowed whole by the sharks in that ballroom. But she had no intention of going as the old Amelia. She picked up her phone and dialed Julian's number. He answered on the first ring. Finally, I was about to send a search party. What is this nonsense about you not going to the gala? Amelia took a deep breath. I am going, Julian, she said, her voice steady and clear. But I need more than a dress. I need armor. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Julian, who knew her better than anyone, could hear the change in her voice. The tremor of hurt was gone, replaced by steel. "Armor," he repeated slowly, a grin evident in his tone. "My darling Emilia, what kind of war are we starting?" "The kind you win," she replied. "And I need to look like a queen, taking back her throne." Julian Croft's studio in the meatpacking district was a chaotic wonderland of fabrics, sketches, and half-finished creations. It was Emilia's sanctuary, a world away from the cold, minimalist perfection of her penthouse. The moment she stepped inside, the scent of silk and hot tea enveloped her, and Julian was there, pulling her into a fierce hug. "All right," he said, stepping back and holding her at arm's length, his sharp eyes taking in the dark circles under hers. "Spill it, from the top, and don't leave out a single sordid detail." And so she did. With a cup of steaming jasmine tea warming her hands, she laid out the entire story. The lies, the gaslighting, the other woman, the secret life, and the cold, calculated plan to discard her. She told him about the Cartier necklace and Isabella's email labeling her the E problem. As she spoke, the story transformed from a source of shame into a case file, a set of facts to be analyzed and acted upon. Julian listened without interruption, his expression shifting from sympathy to righteous fury. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment, sketching idly on a notepad. So he finally said, his pencil moving with sharp, angry strokes. "The plan is not to show up and make a scene. It's not to cry or throw a drink. It's to walk into that room and remind every single person there, especially him and his paramour, of exactly who you are." "More than that," Emilia corrected him gently. "I'm going to show them who I've become." Julian's eyes lit up. "Yes, this is what I'm talking about. Forget the emerald silk. That was for the wife. We need something for the queen. Something that doesn't whisper. Something that roars." For the next 3 days, Julian's studio became their war room. He draped fabrics over her, his hands flying as he pinned and cut. They decided on a color of red so deep it was almost black in the shadows, but that burned like liquid fire in the light. It was the color of blood and wine, the color of vengeance. The design was deceptively simple, a column of silk that clung to her body, with a structured, almost architectural neckline that framed her face and a daringly low back. It was elegant, severe, and utterly commanding. "This dress isn't for a man's approval," Julian declared as he worked. "This dress is a declaration of independence." While Julian forged her physical armor, Emilia began to work on her own strategy. She knew that simply looking powerful wasn't enough. She needed leverage. She needed a weapon. And she knew exactly where to find it. Her mind went back to the Petrocorp merger. Marcus had called it the deal of the decade. He and Isabella had been working on it for over a year. She remembered the early days when Marcus was still sharing his work with her. He had complained endlessly about the complexities of Petrocorp's South American operations, specifically their drilling sites in Ecuador. There were labyrinthine environmental regulations, land disputes with indigenous communities, and a notoriously corrupt local government. Marcus had dismissed these as soft issues, minor hurdles to be handled by the legal grunts. His focus, and Isabella's, was on the financials. The massive oil reserves, the profit margins, the shareholder value. They saw the world in spreadsheets and stock prices. They were blind to the human and environmental cost, not out of malice, but out of a supreme arrogance that believed such things were irrelevant to the bottom line. Emilia started digging. Using the legal research databases she still had access to from her alumni account, she began pulling every file she could find on Petrocorp's Ecuadorian division. She worked late into the night, long after Marcus had fallen asleep. The glow of her laptop screen, her only companion. She cross-referenced news articles from local Spanish-language papers translated indigenous land claim filings and scrutinized satellite images of the drilling sites. On the third night of her search, she found it. It was a single footnote in an obscure environmental impact report filed with a minor regional agency. The report detailed a recent shift in the local laws, a change enacted just 2 months prior that reclassified the land Petrocorp was operating on. It was no longer just commercial land. It was now designated as protected ancestral territory, following a landmark ruling in favor of the local Shuar people. The legal implications were explosive. According to the new statute, any existing commercial contracts would have to be completely renegotiated, with a minimum of 40% of the profits being redirected to a community trust. Furthermore, any environmental damage, past or present, would be subject to massive retroactive fines under the new, stricter regulations. Marcus and Isabella's entire merger valuation was built on the projected profits from those Ecuadorian oil fields. They were counting on a net value of over $10 billion. This new law didn't just reduce that value, it turned a massive asset into a catastrophic liability. The potential fines alone could run into the billions. Not to mention the public relations nightmare of being seen as exploiting an indigenous community. Their deal wasn't just flawed, it was a time bomb. And they were completely unaware of it, because they hadn't bothered to do the real on-the-ground due diligence. They had read the headlines, not the footnotes. Emilia printed everything. She compiled a dossier, clear, concise, and utterly damning. It included the new legislation, the court rulings, translated testimonies from community leaders, and a revised financial projection showing the multi-billion-dollar black hole in the center of their prized deal. The night before the gala, she sat in her silent living room, the finished dossier on the coffee table in front of her. Julian had delivered the dress which now hung in a garment bag in her guest room, a slash of crimson in the dark. Her transformation was nearly complete. She had the armor. She had the weapon. All that was left was the will to use them. For a moment, a wave of doubt washed over her. She thought of the man Marcus used to be the life they had built. Was she really going to destroy him? Then she thought of Isabella's email, the E-problem, keep her managed. She thought of the Cartier necklace, a prize for her replacement. She thought of the years she had sacrificed, the support she had given, all of it, erased and dismissed as a liability. Her doubt hardened into resolve. This wasn't just about vengeance. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming the narrative of her own life. They had written her out of their story. Now she would write the ending. The morning of the gala. Emilia woke before the sunrise. A strange sense of calm had settled over her. The frantic energy of the past few days had receded, leaving behind a quiet, unshakable purpose. She moved through the morning with deliberate grace, making coffee, reading the news, ignoring the palpable thrum of anticipation coming from Marcus's side of the apartment. He was a whirlwind of activity, barking orders into his phone, double-checking his speech, laying out his custom Tom Ford tuxedo. He was so consumed by his own impending triumph that he barely registered her presence. To him, she was just part of the furniture. "Wish me luck," he said, pausing at the door before he left for a final prep meeting at the office. He was already wearing his game face, confident, charming, predatory. "You won't need it," Emilia said, her voice even. "You're more prepared than anyone." He smiled, accepting the compliment as his due. That's right. Tonight, everything changes. He winked at her, a gesture that was meant to be conspiratorial, but felt insulting. Don't wait up. The moment the door clicked shut behind him, Emilia began her own preparations. There was no stylist, no fuss. Just a methodical, ritualistic transformation. She had booked an appointment at a salon under a different name, a chic, minimalist place in Soho that Julian had recommended. She walked in as Emilia Thorne, the quiet, unassuming wife, with her shoulder-length brown hair and practical no-fuss makeup. She walked out 3 hours later as someone else entirely. Her hair had been cut into a sharp, sophisticated bob that grazed her jawline and dyed a shade of deep sable that made her green eyes look like jewels. Her makeup was striking, but not overwhelming, a smoky eye, a nude lip and skin that seemed to glow from within. Back in the apartment, she laid out the dress. In the light of day, the red silk seemed to have a life of its own. It was more than a garment. It was a statement of intent. As she slipped it on, the fabric felt cool and heavy against her skin, a comforting weight. She looked at herself in the full-length mirror, and for the first time in years, she recognized the woman staring back. It was the woman she had been before Marcus, confident, intelligent, and fiercely independent. The past 10 years had buried her, but she had not disappeared. She accessorized simply. Diamond studs in her ears, her own purchased with her first bonus from the law firm, and a pair of killer heels that made her feel 6 feet tall. No necklace. Her throat was bare. She wanted the space left empty, a silent rebuke to the Cartier diamonds that would be gracing Isabella's neck. The final piece was the dossier. She had condensed the executive summary and key findings onto a single encrypted USB drive small enough to conceal in her clutch. The full printed report was in a sealed envelope addressed to Mr. Alistair Thorne, the Plaza Hotel security. A trusted courier arranged by Julian would deliver it at precisely 9 p.m., 1 hour before the speeches were scheduled to begin. At 7:30 p.m., she was ready. She stood once more by the window looking out at the city. But tonight it didn't look intimidating. It looked like a kingdom. Her kingdom. She had booked a private car to take her to the hotel. As she rode through the glittering streets of Manhattan, she felt no fear, only a profound sense of clarity. She wasn't a woman scorned seeking petty revenge. She was a CEO about to execute a hostile takeover of her own life. She arrived at the plaza and chose not to use the main entrance. Instead, she entered through a side door, leading to the residence, bypassing the red carpet and the throng of photographers. She had no interest in their cameras. Her audience was inside. She took a moment in a quiet alcove, her clutch in her hand, the weight of the small USB drive, a tangible reminder of her purpose. She could hear the muffled sound of the orchestra and the buzz of hundreds of conversations from the grand ballroom down the hall. Taking a deep, steadying breath, she began to walk. The doors to the ballroom were massive, ornate sentinels of gilded wood. As she approached, 2 ushers moved to stop her, their eyes politely questioning, searching for an invitation she did not have. She didn't break her stride. She simply looked at them, her gaze direct and unwavering. "I'm Mrs. Thorne," she said, her voice low and clear. "Please open the doors." There was something in her tone, a quiet authority, so absolute that they didn't question it. They looked at each other for a split second, then as if compelled by an unseen force, they each took a handle and pulled. The doors swung inward, and the wall of sound and light hit her. The grand ballroom was a sea of black ties and glittering gowns, a universe of power and influence. And as Amelia paused on the threshold framed by the doorway, a hush began to fall. It started at the back of the room and spread like a wave, a ripple of silence moving through the crowd as heads turned one by one. Conversations faltered. Glasses were lowered. The orchestra's melody seemed to thin and then fade away into nothing. In the space of 10 seconds, the entire room, 500 of the most powerful people in New York, had fallen completely silent. Every eye was on her. Across the vast expanse of the ballroom, she saw him. Marcus was standing near the stage, a glass of champagne in his hand, Isabella Ricci beside him. Isabella was radiant in a silver-sequined gown, the Cartier diamond and sapphire necklace blazing at her throat. They were laughing at something someone had said, the very picture of a power couple. Then Marcus felt the shift in the room. His smile wavered, and he turned his head, following the gaze of the crowd. His eyes found Amelia. The champagne glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the polished marble floor. The sound echoed in the cavernous silence. His face went white, a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. He stared at her as if he were seeing a ghost, a beautiful, terrifying ghost in a blood-red dress. Isabella, annoyed by the interruption, turned to see what had caused the commotion. Her practiced smile froze on her lips, her eyes widening in disbelief before narrowing into slits of pure venom. The necklace, her trophy, suddenly seemed garish and desperate. Amelia held their gazes for a beat longer. She had their attention. She had everyone's attention. Then, with a slow, deliberate grace, she began to walk into the room. Her heels clicked against the marble, the only sound in the dead silence. It was not the walk of a wife. It was the entrance of a queen. The walk across the ballroom floor felt like a mile. With every step, Amelia could feel the weight of 500 pairs of eyes on her, a mixture of confusion, curiosity, and sheer astonishment. Whispers started to erupt like brush fires in the silence. "Who is that?" "That's Amelia Thorne, Marcus's wife." "I don't believe it." "What is she doing here? I heard they were separated." She ignored them all. Her focus was laser-sharp, fixed on the stage at the far end of the room, and the two figures standing beside it, frozen in a tableau of disbelief. Marcus looked like he had been struck by lightning, his mouth slightly agape, his skin pale and clammy. Isabella had recovered more quickly. Her shock had morphed into a mask of icy fury. If looks could kill, Amelia would have been incinerated on the spot. Amelia didn't approach them directly. That would be too simple, too much like a domestic squabble. Instead, she changed her trajectory, moving towards the side of the room, where a formidable silver-haired man was standing, watching the entire scene with shrewd, intelligent eyes. Alistair Thorne, the patriarch of the family and the undisputed king of this empire. He was a man who valued control and order above all else. An unexpected disruption at his gala would be infuriating to him. Amelia was counting on it. As she approached, Alistair's expression was unreadable, a mixture of surprise and stern disapproval. He had always been civil to Amelia, but in a distant, formal way. He saw her, she knew, as little more than a necessary but unremarkable accessory for his ambitious son. "Amelia," he said, his voice a low rumble. "This is unexpected." "Alistair," she replied, her tone respectful but firm. She met his gaze without flinching. "I apologize for the unorthodox entrance. There's a matter of urgent corporate importance that I needed to bring to your attention personally." His eyebrows shot up. Corporate importance. My dear, this is a party, not a board meeting. Sometimes the two overlap, she said smoothly. A courier delivered a package to your security team at 9 p.m. I would urge you to review its contents at your earliest convenience. It pertains to the Petrocorp merger. Alistair's eyes narrowed. He was a man who could smell risk from a mile away. The seriousness in her voice, the utter lack of hysteria, had put him on high alert. He gave a curt nod, his gaze flicking over towards his son, who was now desperately trying to regain his composure. At that moment, the event's master of ceremonies, seeing the prolonged and awkward silence, decided to reclaim control of the evening. His booming voice filled the ballroom. Ladies and gentlemen, a little unexpected excitement to keep us on our toes. And now for the moment we've all been waiting for. It gives me great pleasure to introduce two of Thorn Industries' brightest minds, who have spearheaded a deal that will redefine our company for the next century. Please welcome to the stage the architects of the Petrocorp merger, Isabella Ricci and Marcus Thorn. A polite but slightly hesitant round of applause filled the room. The spell was broken. Marcus, jolted back to life by the announcement, shot Amelia a look of pure panic before plastering a shaky smile on his face and gesturing for Isabella to precede him towards the stage. Isabella ascended the steps with a predatory grace. She was a performer, and this was her stage. She straightened her shoulders, the Cartier necklace glittering under the spotlights like a weapon. She was going to seize back the narrative, to erase Amelia's disruptive entrance with the force of her own charisma. She stepped up to the podium, her eyes sweeping over the crowd, deliberately ignoring Amelia. Thank you. She began, her voice smooth as silk, radiating confidence. Tonight, we are not just celebrating another successful year. We are celebrating the dawn of a new era for Thorn Industries. She was brilliant. Amelia had to give her that. She spoke with passion and precision, outlining the strategic advantages of the Petrocorp acquisition. She painted a vivid picture of market dominance, of unprecedented growth, of a future where Thorn Industries was not just a player, but the undisputed leader in the global energy sector. The crowd was captivated. The whispers about Amelia's appearance died down, replaced by murmurs of approval. This monumental achievement, Isabella continued, her voice swelling, was not the work of one person. It required a team with vision, courage, and a relentless drive for excellence. It required a partner who was not afraid to take risks, to challenge conventions, and to work tirelessly towards a shared goal. She turned and smiled at Marcus, who was standing a few feet behind her, looking profoundly uncomfortable. Marcus Thorn is that partner. His support and leadership were instrumental every step of the way. The phrasing was clever. His support. She positioned him as her second, the helpful assistant to her visionary leadership. She was claiming the victory and the VP role as her own right here in front of everyone. In a different context, Amelia might have felt a flicker of satisfaction at seeing Marcus subtly undermined. Isabella's speech reached its crescendo. The Petrocorp deal isn't just a contract, it's a promise of a stronger, more profitable, and more powerful future for every single person in this room. Thank you. The ballroom erupted in thunderous applause. The disruption was forgotten. Isabella was triumphant. She had won. She stood there basking in the adoration of the crowd, the diamonds on her neck flashing like victory fireworks. She glanced towards Amelia, a small, triumphant smirk playing on her lips. It was a clear final dismissal. You lost. The MC stepped back to the microphone. Incredible thank you, Isabella Ricci. And now a few words from her partner, in this historic success, Marcus Thorne. Marcus walked to the podium, looking rattled. Isabella had just taken 90% of the credit for their shared project, and his wife, who was supposed to be at home, was standing in the audience, looking like a spectre at the feast. He cleared his throat, shuffling his notes. He was supposed to build on Isabella's momentum to seal their joint victory. But before he could utter a single word, Emilia began to move. She didn't run or shout. She simply walked from her position at the side of the room towards the small set of stairs at the front of the stage, her expression serene, her purpose clear. The crowd, sensing another shift in the drama, quieted once more. Marcus saw her coming. His eyes widened in terror. "Emilia, what are you doing?" He hissed, his voice just loud enough to be caught by the microphone. A faint, desperate plea that echoed through the ballroom. She didn't answer him. She reached the stairs, ascended them with a regal calm, and walked directly towards the center of the stage. She stopped beside the podium, taking the second microphone from its stand. She stood there side by side with her husband's mistress, the betrayed wife and the triumphant lover, both bathed in the unforgiving glare of the spotlight. The silence in the room was absolute. It was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Isabella's smirk was gone, replaced by a look of sheer disbelief and rage. Marcus looked like he was about to faint. Emilia leaned towards the microphone. Her voice, when she spoke, was not loud, but it was so clear and steady that it carried to the farthest corner of the vast room. "Good evening," she said. "My name is Emilia Thorne, and I have a few notes on the presentation." The silence that followed Emilia's opening line was not just an absence of noise. It was a living entity, thick with tension and anticipation. Every person in the grand ballroom was holding their breath, waiting for the explosion. They expected tears, accusations, a messy public airing of a domestic dispute. It was the kind of delicious high society scandal they secretly craved. Emilia gave them none of it. She stood at the podium, a picture of composure, the crimson of her dress, a stark contrast to Isabella's shimmering silver. She was not a hysterical wife. She was an executive about to deliver a correction. Ms. Ricci's presentation was compelling. Emilia began, her voice calm and measured as she turned slightly to acknowledge Isabella. The use of the formal Ms. Ricci was a deliberate surgical strike. It stripped away the intimacy and recast Isabella as a mere professional colleague. Her passion is undeniable. However, in their relentless drive for excellence, it appears she and my husband have overlooked a critical piece of due diligence. A piece that doesn't just alter the valuation of the Petrocorp merger, but in fact turns it into one of the most catastrophic liabilities Thorne Industries has ever faced. A collective gasp went through the audience. This was not about an affair. This was about money. Billions of dollars of it. The mood shifted instantly from salacious curiosity to cold, hard fear. Investors gripped their wine glasses, their faces paling. Board members leaned forward in their seats. Marcus finally found his voice. "Emilia, stop this," he pleaded, stepping toward her. "You don't know what you're talking about." "On the contrary, Marcus," she replied, not even glancing at him. Her focus was on the audience, on the powerful men and women whose fortunes were tied to the company. "I know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking about Ecuador, specifically Petrocorp's operations in the Sucumbíos province." She saw a flicker of recognition in Alistair Thorne's eyes. He was already connecting the dots. "While you and Ms. Ricci were focused on the top-line revenue from those oil fields," Emilia continued, her voice gaining strength, You seem to have missed the ruling of the Ecuadorian Constitutional Court on May 17th of this year. The ruling in the case of Shuar Nation vs. the Ministry of Energy fundamentally reclassified 2.5 million acres of land, including the land on which Petrocorp's primary drilling sites are located, as protected ancestral territory. She paused, letting the weight of that information sink in. She could see the confusion on the faces of the executives. This was obscure foreign legal detail. "What does this mean in practical terms?" she asked, her tone becoming that of a lecturer. "It means two things. First, under the new Indigenous Rights Act, any existing commercial contracts on this land are subject to renegotiation with a mandatory 40% profit-sharing agreement, payable to the Shuar Community Trust." A wave of audible shocks and curses swept through the room. The $10 billion asset had just had $4 billion wiped from its value. Isabella finally broke her stunned silence. That's a lie," she stammered, grabbing the podium for support. "Our legal team vetted everything." "That would have been flagged, would it?" Emilia countered, her voice turning sharp. "Did your $500 an hour New York lawyers read the footnotes in reports from a regional environmental agency? Did they translate the court filings that were only published in the local Spanish dialect? Or did they just read the English language summaries provided by Petrocorp's own internal team? The same team that had every reason to hide this inconvenient truth until the ink on your deal was dry." She didn't need an answer. The panicked look exchanged between Marcus and Isabella was answer enough. They had been played, and their arrogance had made them easy marks. "But it gets worse," Emilia said, her voice dropping, drawing the audience in closer. "The second implication of the ruling is the retroactive environmental liability. The new law allows for fines to be levied for all environmental damages incurred since the start of operations. Given Petrocorp's well-documented history of oil spills and deforestation in the region, my conservative estimate based on the fine per hectare schedule outlined in the statute places the immediate liability at approximately $6 billion. The room erupted. People were standing up, shouting questions. The $10 billion asset was now a $10 billion liability. The deal of the decade had become the poison pill of the century. Emilia raised her hand for silence, and miraculously, she got it. "This information, including the relevant statutes, court documents, and a revised financial projection, was delivered to your chairman, Mr. Alistair Thorne, an hour ago," she announced. "I've also taken the liberty of putting the executive summary onto a drive." She held up the small USB stick from her clutch. "For your convenience." She then turned for the first time to look directly at Marcus. The man she had loved, the man she had built, was staring at her with a look of utter devastation. He wasn't just ruined, he was annihilated. And he knew in that moment that she had done it. Her gaze shifted to Isabella. The triumphant queen of the gala was now just a woman in a silver dress, her face a mask of horror, her career and reputation evaporating under the hot glare of the spotlights. Emilia's voice softened, but lost none of its power. It became personal, intimate, yet every word was a sahulhud, was a dagger meant for the entire room to hear. "This deal was built on a lie of omission," she said, her eyes locked on Isabella. "A dangerous, expensive lie, born of arrogance and greed. But that seems to be a recurring theme tonight." Her gaze drifted down to the glittering Cartier necklace. A beautiful piece, diamonds and a sapphire. A trophy, I imagine. A prize for a job well done. Isabella instinctively raised a hand to her throat, as if to hide it. But like the merger, it was meant to celebrate. Emilia concluded, her voice ringing with a final devastating clarity. It is built on a foundation of deceit, and anything built on such a foundation will eventually collapse. She placed the microphone carefully back on its stand. She didn't look at Marcus or Isabella again. She turned her back on them, on the stage, on the life they had tried to steal from her. In absolute silence, she descended the stairs. The crowd parted for her as she walked, a sea of stunned faces turning to watch her go. She reached Alistair Thorne, who was standing rigid, his face like a thundercloud. He looked at her, and for the first time she saw a glimmer of respect in his eyes. He didn't speak. He just gave her a single, sharp nod. It was all the confirmation she needed. Emilia continued her walk, her head held high, her steps even and unhurried. She walked through the parted crowd, across the marble floor, and towards the grand gilded doors. She didn't look back. She pushed the doors open and stepped out into the hallway, leaving behind the wreckage of 2 careers, 1 multi-billion-dollar deal, and a life that no longer belonged to her. The doors swung shut behind her, cutting off the explosion of chaos that erupted in the ballroom. The war was over, and she had won. The gala's implosion was immediate and spectacular. By morning, the financial world was ablaze with the story of Thorne Industries' averted catastrophe, and Emilia's name was on the lips of every analyst and news anchor. She was the brilliant, mysterious woman who had saved the company from itself. Ignoring the media frenzy, Emilia disappeared from the public eye, finding sanctuary away from the chaos. The consequences for Marcus and Isabella were brutal and swift. Acting with surgical precision, Alistair Thorne convened an emergency board meeting at dawn. Before the stock market opened, a press release announced the termination of the Petrocorp merger. Marcus Thorne and Isabella Ricci were fired for gross negligence, their careers publicly and irrevocably shattered. Isabella vanished. Marcus, disgraced, desperately tried to contact Emilia with a barrage of voicemails, swinging between remorse and rage. She deleted them all unheard and filed for divorce the next day. Her request was simple. She wanted nothing from their life together, but her freedom. In the following months, Emilia rebuilt. She secured a business loan, silently co-signed by a grateful Alistair, and opened a boutique consulting firm, Thorne Strategic Advisors. Specializing in ethical risk and corporate governance, her firm was an instant success. Poetically, her first client was Thorne Industries, who hired her to audit their international projects, paying her handsomely to prevent the very kind of disaster she had exposed. 6 months after the gala, Emilia was walking through Central Park. Her new life was her own, defined by a peaceful apartment in the West Village and work that gave her purpose. As she passed the Bethesda Terrace, she saw him. Marcus was sitting on a bench, a ghost of the man he once was. The tailored suits were gone, replaced by worn clothes. The arrogant confidence had been hollowed out, leaving behind only exhaustion. He looked up, and their eyes met. He didn't approach, but Emilia found herself walking toward him, compelled to close the final chapter. She stood before him, calm and confident. "Marcus," she said, her voice even. "Emilia," he rasped. "You look good." "I am good," she replied, the words a simple, profound truth. A heavy silence hung between them, filled with the ghosts of their shared past. "I'm sorry," he finally whispered, looking down at his hands. "For everything. I was a fool. I lost everything that mattered because I was chasing things that didn't." Emilia listened, not for him, but for herself. The apology was the final stone falling into place. "Yes, you were," she agreed, her tone devoid of malice. "But people can rebuild, Marcus. From ashes. I did." She looked at the man on the bench one last time, a stranger who wore a familiar face. There was no anger left, only a quiet sense of finality. "Goodbye, Marcus," she said softly. With that, she turned and walked away, into the autumn sunlight, not looking back. She was walking toward her future, a future built not from the ruins of his life, but from the enduring strength of her own. Emilia Thorne's story isn't just about revenge. It's a powerful testament to the strength that can be forged in the fires of betrayal. She walked into that gala as a wife who had been dismissed and underestimated, and walked out as the master of her own destiny. By refusing to be a victim, and instead using her intelligence and integrity as her weapons, she not only reclaimed her own life, but also exposed the corrupt foundation of the world that had cast her aside. Her journey reminds us that true power isn't about the name you carry or the wealth you possess, but about the unwavering strength of your own character and the courage to demand the respect you deserve. What did you think of Emilia's incredible transformation? Could you have done what she did? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please hit the like button. Share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength, and subscribe for more unforgettable stories.